sell it, go ahead and sell it.
Just give me a place where I can maybe get my disability, you know, Social Security, and like that. He's all right.
San Francisco is known around the world for its bridges, its spirit of innovation, and a glittering skyline. But right now, the real story sits at the curb. In the most recent count, the city recorded more than 8,300 people experiencing homelessness, up 7% since 2022, and more than half of them sleep outside or in vehicles without any steady roof overhead. These aren't characters on a report. They're the tired breaths stretched across the Tenderloin, Soma, and the Mission. Neighborhoods where tents rise, get swept, and yet never truly disappear.
They're at work, and if they're at work, what are they supposed to do? They can't get off of work to come and take their stuff, can they?
And yet, just as need is climbing, 3 blows are landing at once. From Washington, hundreds of millions of dollars in HUD funding for long-term housing are being cut, shifting money towards short-term models, and quietly pulling away the one foundation that helps the most vulnerable hold on to stable lot. Meanwhile, here at home, San Francisco is staring at a $780 million budget shortfall, forcing the city to scale back supportive housing programs and frontline services, links already stretched so thin they could snap at any moment.
Yeah, so the transit agencies are facing huge deficits, so they were counting on a $750 million loan to get them through the 2027 year. Now, the lawmakers...
On the ground, the clampdown on vehicle living, from 2-hour parking limits to towing aging RVs, has shut the last door of shelter for more than 1,000 people who once relied on a car as a temporary home. So when long-term housing gets cut, the local budget runs out of air, and mobile shelter is narrowed too. Where exactly do the folks packed into the Tenderloin or Soma go next? If one night the person in that spot were your child or your relative, what would you want the city to choose? To push them out of sight, or to take their hand and protect that last measure of dignity? Look closely. This isn't only a story about budgets and policies, it's the question of who this city intends to be in the years ahead. Back in the 1,980 seconds, when the Reagan administration slashed social welfare, the foundation of the safety net began to crack. Fast forward to today, and there's another even harsher blow. The tech boom has driven rents to suffocating heights, a one-bedroom averaging about $3,500 a month, enough to push blue-collar workers out of the city faster than you can say eviction notice. After the pandemic, things got worse. Service and hourly jobs vanished in waves, with unemployment among low-income workers spiking to 15%, creating a perfect storm. At the local level, San Francisco has taken yet another hit. A $817 million shortfall for 2025-2027 forced Mayor Lurie into painful choices. Cutting $185 million from contracts and nonprofits, eliminating 1,400 vacant positions to preserve core services, yet still trimming nearly a quarter of mobile clinics and mental health outreach. In other words, just as need is peaking, the safety net is shrinking. All of that upheaval leads to a hard-to-deny reality. Today, San Francisco holds two parallel truths. On the surface, it remains one of the wealthiest, most dazzling cities in America. But right beneath those gleaming office towers, more than 8,300 people are unhoused across a footprint of only about 47 square miles. That number is more than a statistic. It is lives slipping through the safety net, older adults, laid-off workers, single parents, people battling addiction and mental illness. 2024 counts show roughly 4,354 people sleeping outdoors each night. In tents, on sidewalks, under overpasses. The number of homeless families jumped 94% in just 2 years, and more than 1,600 additional families remain uncounted. Nationwide, more than 1.1 million people sought homelessness services in 2024, up 12% year over year. San Francisco is among the starkest hotspots, where every gap in housing, healthcare, and social supports shows through, impossible to hide. And here's the thing, budget votes and policy memos signed far from the sidewalk can determine whether someone keeps a key in their hand or survives another cold night outside. San Francisco now feels like a mirror that's hard to face, forcing each of us to ask, are we protecting the most vulnerable or just protecting the comfort of those lucky enough to have a home?
Damn, the e-books.
Out on the streets of San Francisco right now, what people think they're seeing and what's actually happening can be miles apart. Yes, the number of tents has dropped to its lowest level since 2018, only around 220 to 240 across the entire city. But even with fewer tents, the total number of people experiencing homelessness has climbed to more than 8,300, about a 7% increase since 2022. Cleaner sidewalks don't mean less suffering. They just mean that the struggle has been scattered across different corners of the city. After the recent Supreme Court ruling, the city ramped up enforcement against sleeping outdoors. Since the summer of 2024, more than 750 illegal lodging cases have been recorded, and March 2025 alone saw 119 arrests, more than the previous 6 years combined. The streets may look tidier, but the cost is real. People woken up in the middle of the night, losing their belongings or being forced to move on when they have nowhere else to go. At the same time, the fentanyl crisis still hangs over the city like a heavy shadow. In 2024, drug-related deaths fell to about 633, down from a record 806 the year before, a hopeful sign, but still far too high for anyone to claim the danger has passed. And when key services are cut back, especially permanent supportive housing, many people who just finished treatment or were stabilizing end up losing their housing within weeks. On top of that, the new RV restrictions pushed hundreds of people out of the only shelter they had left. When someone loses an RV, they're not just losing a place to sleep, they're losing the last fragile sense of safety they've been holding on to. So, are we truly solving the problem? We're just making it less visible. And if these aggressive measures only force people in crisis to keep circling the city, can we honestly call that a solution, or is it simply relocating someone else's pain? San Francisco is still wrestling with those questions every single day, right there on the streets we all think we know so well. The city hasn't been standing still, but its response leaves many of us torn between hope and frustration. San Francisco just approved a $15.9 billion two-year budget, closing an $817 million deficit by cutting more than 1,000 positions across departments. While police and fire were spared, several homelessness and housing programs took real hits, something you can feel immediately on San Francisco streets, especially throughout downtown San Francisco, where street outreach homeless teams warn the cuts will fall hardest on those already barely hanging on. And honestly, when nonprofit leaders feel pushed so far they resort to hunger strikes, you can't help but wonder, who is this budget really protecting? Still, it's not entirely bleak. After weeks of public pressure, the Board of Supervisors forced the administration to restore tens of millions for prevention and long-term housing, instead of shifting everything into temporary shelters. For families, one eviction away from becoming homeless in San Francisco, that wasn't politics, it was survival. At the same time, the state approved more than $56 million to help convert buildings into supportive housing, a small but meaningful boost in a relentless San Francisco housing crisis. But even as the city rebuilds with one hand, it restricts survival options with the other. The new San Francisco RV ban limits vehicles used as homes to 2-hour parking. For older adults, night shift workers, or people relying on mental health services SF homeless programs, that rule doesn't feel like regulation, it feels like eviction. And here's the uncomfortable question. If RVs are banned, but shelter beds remain scarce, where exactly are people expected to go? Federal changes now, slashing funding for permanent supportive housing, only deepen the public health crisis San Francisco faces. Money is disappearing faster than it's replaced. And ultimately, we're left with a hard truth. Do we want cleaner blocks, or a city where the most vulnerable actually have a chance to survive? When you strip away all the policy talk and dollar signs, what's left in San Francisco right now is people trying not to lose the little stability they finally grabbed onto. I keep thinking about the folks in permanent supportive housing, mostly disabled, many older, who were told, you're housed now, you're safe. Now they're hearing that a federal rule change could pull more than $100 million out of the Bay Area programs that keep them inside, a shift that could push roughly 177,000 formerly homeless people nationwide back toward the edge. This isn't abstract anymore. It's San Francisco homeless news in real time. So let me ask you, as one ordinary person to another, what does it do to a man in his 70s with a walker and heart meds when he starts hearing the word cuts again after finally sleeping indoors for the first time in years? Just a few miles away, families and RVs are getting their own kind of wake-up call. The city's new 2-hour limit on large vehicles tells more than 1,400 people living in their cars that their home is no longer welcome on San Francisco streets. And here's the sting. A 2024 assessment found that nearly 90% of unsheltered families in the San Francisco homeless crisis are living in vehicles because there simply isn't enough affordable housing. On paper, there are permits and buyback programs. In real life, that might mean a mom working a cleaning job all day and driving loops all night to avoid a ticket. Tell me honestly, is that public safety, or is that just moving poor families out of sight? Meanwhile, City Hall is wrestling with a $782 million deficit and balancing it with an austerity budget that keeps police and fire intact, while cutting deeply into homelessness and housing services. Yes, Tenderloin homeless camps and San Francisco Tenderloin tents may be down after crackdowns, especially in San Francisco's street drug hotspots tied to San Francisco drug homeless clusters, but thousands of people still have nowhere to sleep. And here's the uncomfortable question I can't shake. Are we solving homelessness in San Francisco, or simply making it less visible in the neighborhoods that matter most to voters and investors? If we're willing to balance the books on the backs of the most vulnerable, what does that say about the kind of city and the kind of country we're becoming? San Francisco is standing at a fork in the road right now. And if we're honest, both paths are rough. On paper, the numbers look better. Tent counts are at their lowest since 2019, with only about 222 tents citywide and a 62% drop over the past year. But at the very same time, overall homelessness has risen, and the number of unhoused families has almost doubled since 2022. So, yes, the sidewalks are a little clearer, but the deeper story is far from solved. Looking ahead, three big decisions are shaping where this city goes. First, Washington is moving to cap federal homelessness dollars so that only 30% can go to permanent supportive housing, down from about 90% before. That shift puts thousands of long-term housing placements at risk, and a large share of the people in those units are older adults who can't just start over again on the sidewalk. Second, City Hall has chosen to crack down on people living in RVs, limiting oversized vehicles to 2-hour parking and enforcing fines and towing, with a small buyback and voucher program on the side. Officials say it's about safety and dignity. Advocates say it's about pushing poor people out of sight. When a city tells hundreds of vehicle residents to move every 2 hours or give up the only roof they have, is that really a solution, or just a cleaner photo for the evening news? Meanwhile, San Francisco is closing an $800 million-plus budget gap, and the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing is facing cuts of more than $100 million, even as nonprofits warn that services will shrink. And one director has gone on hunger strike in protest. So we're tightening the belt right when people are most fragile. Does that sound like recovery to you? Or does it sound like we're quietly lowering our expectations for how a wealthy city should treat its neighbors? So, where is San Francisco headed? If we stay on this track, we may end up with fewer tents in the photo frame, but more people drifting between shelters, cars, and couches. Less visible, maybe, but just as lost. The real test in the years ahead isn't whether we can clear a block. It's whether we still believe that the folks who've fallen the furthest are worth a long-term, steady investment, not just a quick sweep and a press conference. Conclusion. Right now, as federal housing rules put more than $100 million for supportive housing at risk, and City Hall stares at a $782 million deficit, San Francisco is once again deciding who gets to belong and who doesn't. RV bans push people from a worn-out vehicle back onto cold concrete, while funding cuts quietly drain the programs that kept so many San Francisco homeless residents indoors for the first time in years. It's the kind of moment you'd expect to see in a homeless in San Francisco documentary, not in a city with this much wealth. So I have to ask you, in all honesty, when the budget comes before the body, what does that say about us? And more sharply, are we fixing the streets or just removing the people we don't want to see? Because behind every policy, there's a human being trying to hold on to one more day of stability. And if our solutions create cleaner sidewalks but leave more people wandering with nowhere to go, then maybe the real crisis isn't just on the pavement, maybe it's in what we're willing to accept as normal. And let's be honest, a city doesn't lose its soul all at once. It slips away in small decisions. A funding shift here, a policy tweak there, a quiet vote in a crowded chamber. Until one day, we look around and realize we've built a system where survival is a lottery and compassion is optional. We talk about efficiency, public order, and fiscal responsibility, but none of those phrases mean much to the person who just had their belongings swept into a garbage truck at 5 a.m. Or to the grandmother who finally had a stable room after decades on the street, but is now hearing her housing program may not be funded next year. What does belonging even mean in a place like this? If the only people who can stay are the ones who can afford the rising cost of existence, then the city we say we love becomes a museum. Polished, curated, and empty of the people who gave it character in the first place. San Francisco has never been perfect, but it has always been a place that tried. A place where outsiders could become neighbors, where reinvention wasn't just a slogan, but a lifeline. The question now is whether we still believe in that spirit, or whether the future we're choosing is one where the city shines on the surface while more and more people fade into the margins. Because in the end, the measure of a great city isn't how clean its sidewalks look.
It's crowded over here.